Hi, everyone. I see that there's a couple of other people that joined. Welcome. We are sending around a poll just to hear where you're calling from and what brought you to this event today. And we will start the event in a couple of minutes, but if you can fill out the poll, that would be awesome. Thank you. Perfect. It looks like we have a good group, so I will go ahead and get us started. Welcome, everyone. We are so excited to have you here, whether you're joining from the US or out to the US. Thank you so much for making the time today. Oh, actually, I have the statistics of where we're from. So it looks like most of us are either from the US. We have a couple of people in Europe, and it's great to see that most of you are here to learn more about the water crisis. So that's awesome, because that's what we're here today. So we're so excited to be partnering with Solvatten. Solvatten is a social enterprise that created a portable, solar-powered water purifying device for people in developing countries. And we're here today to co-host a panel around access to safe, clean water and hygiene in developing countries and also in the US. So Emma from Ceres will be moderating a panel and she'll share more about the panelists. But today we'll do a little welcome, some Zoom etiquette reminders. I know probably a lot of you have been on Zoom calls, but it's always good to have some reminders. We'll then jump into speaker introductions and a short video about Solvatten to help shape the conversation. Then we'll jump into a panel where you'll get to hear from the three panelists. This will be around 20 minutes. And then we will have a Q&A. This will be an opportunity for all of you to ask any and all questions to our amazing panelists. And then we will wrap it up. So we're hoping to make the most of our time together. Boris, over to you.
Yeah, so I'll be sharing my screen kind of during the introductions to set the groundwork. But you know, once we get into the moderated panel and the Q&A, we'll probably have the videos up. So, you know, it's more of an intimate conversation. If you have questions during the moderated panel, you could either save them for the Q&A or put them in the chat.
Perfect. So before you get started, I'm not really sure if you're familiar with Net Impact, but I'm Maritza Rendon, and I'm the president for the Net Impact San Francisco chapter. I've been with Net Impact for about 2 years now, and it's been an amazing experience. What I love about Net Impact is that we are really an organization that's looking to connect individuals and professionals interested in sustainability and social impact. And we do this through several ways, but mostly it's through events like this, and also by creating conversations online. So thank you again for being here. We have monthly events, and this event is focused around water, and at the end of this event, we'll share more about our upcoming events. So our chapter is around 4,000 members strong, and we really have a variety of chapters of events. It's either virtual happy hours. Most of our events are virtual right now because of COVID, but generally it's a mix of panels and networking events. Perfect. And then today, all of our event proceeds are going to UNICEF for their WASH program. So we actually raised over $260 today. So thank you so much for all your contributions. Just a couple, sorry, if we can go back to the next slide, sorry. Just a couple of reminders around Zoom etiquette. If you can, I know it's early or late on your end, but if you can turn on your camera, that would be amazing. And we recommend the active speaker view. Please stay on mute. And when we open up the audience Q&A, please use the hand emoticon or raise your hand, and I will call your name, and then you'll unmute yourself and ask a question, or you can always use the chat function. Perfect. Now over to Emma.
Great. Hi, everyone, and thank you, Net Impact and Solvatten for organizing the event. My name is Emma Conover, and I'm a manager with Ceres. We're a nonprofit based in the United States, focused on driving private sector leadership on sustainability across a range of environmental issue areas, including fresh water. I'll be moderating the session today, and I want to just start by welcoming all of you who are able to join and give a special welcome to our three panelists who are joining us live from Uganda, Sweden, and California. Before I introduce our speakers, I want to provide some brief opening remarks to kind of set the stage for our conversation around water and hygiene. As we're living in the midst of a pandemic, we hear this recommendation to wash our hands often. But for 1.9 billion people, there is no access to safe water or hygiene at home, and they rely on sources that may often be contaminated. Water, poverty, and energy access can all be addressed, and there are already some great solutions out there. What often stands in the way of the problem in these solutions is financial cost and behavior change. We all know that ensuring that everyone has access to sustainable water and sanitation services is a critical stepping stone for a sustainable world for all. So I'm very excited to introduce our expert panelists today who will be sharing their knowledge and experience with us. We can go to the next slide. Petra is the founder and CEO of Solvatten, a social enterprise with the mission of providing people in developing countries with access to safe and hot water in a portable, environmentally friendly way. Juliet is the Associate WASH Officer with UNHCR in Uganda, coordinating the refugee response programs of agencies providing water supply, sanitation, hygiene services. And finally, Darian serves as the Executive Director of Numi Foundation, through which he has helped deliver clean, safe drinking water to over 10,000 farmers and families. So welcome to our three speakers, and I know we all look forward to hearing from each of you today. As Maritza mentioned, we'll be seeing a short video from Solvatten before we jump into our panel. So just turning it back over to the Net Impact team.
Unclean water is poured through a fabric filter that catches large contaminants. Then, the case unfolds like a book, ready to catch the sun's purifying rays. After a few hours, a green smiley face indicator lets you know the water is safe to use, ready for cooking, bathing, cleaning, and drinking. With Solvatten, people can collect water from sources closer to their homes that they previously avoided because of how dirty they were, giving them more time to work and earn an income or go to school. Solvatten is simple, effective, and built to last.
Great, wonderful video, thank you. Now to begin our panel discussion, I think we can dive right into Uganda in the middle of Africa and host to the most refugees on the continent. And we have Juliet with us here today to describe a bit more about the situation at the moment. And I guess just to kind of kick things off, it would be great, Juliet, if you can begin by sharing a bit more about your role and focus.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Emma. Yes, my role, I work with UNHCR, where my role is to oversee the WASH operations in the southwestern refugee operation of Uganda. In the Southwestern Refugee Operation, we have about more than 330,000 refugees at the moment in the southwestern part of Uganda, out of more than 1 million in Uganda as a whole. And my specific role is to oversee the refugee operations, WASH operations in the southwestern part of Uganda, covering a wide range of refugee nationalities from Congo to Ethiopia to Eritrea, Burundi, Rwanda. We have about, I think, 7 dominant nationalities, and then a few other, small numbers from other locations. So what we do with UNHCR as far as WASH is concerned, UNHCR generally, as you will have known, has a role of supporting assistance, provision of assistance to refugees and host communities. That is becoming more significant lately. So it's not only about refugees, it's refugees and the neighboring host communities. So in this role, we provide access to safe water, adequate safe water as much as possible, and sanitation services to the refugees and the neighboring host communities without any discrimination. And along with that, we also provide options for improving their hygiene practices, both at household and institutional level. So of course, this covers a wide range of things. I believe when I say WASH, we do understand what WASH is. It's covering water supply, sanitation, and hygiene. So in this, we do both the hardware aspects as well as the software aspects. Hardware in the sense of provision of the infrastructure requirements for provision of the water supply, for instance, the sanitation options, the latrines, the incinerators, all the hardware, the infrastructure requirements for providing adequate WASH services. And then on the software side, we talk about the use of this infrastructure that is provided. We talk about even the education, awareness raising, the whole sensitization that comes with it to ensure that the infrastructure that is provided is used adequately, properly, but also efficiently and sustainably, because that is now the new priority about the sustainable use of the infrastructure that we have. So I guess that is all for the first bit of the question, or please feel free to prompt me if you'd like me to add some more.
Great, thank you, Juliet. That was wonderful detail. I imagine there's perhaps a range of levels of sophistication on the line, so it might be helpful just for everyone to get a quick overview on WASH, if you wouldn't mind, quickly.
Okay, a quick overview on WASH, maybe. Well, as I would have said, WASH is an acronym that goes for water supply, sanitation, and hygiene. When we talk about water supply, we're talking about the different modes of water supply. As I said, it all starts with the hardware aspects of it, but also has the software aspects. So on water supply, we talk about technologies as much as piped water systems. We talk about point sources like boreholes, shallow wells, hand dug wells, different technologies, all towards provision of water. We have boreholes which some are low yielding and so have hand pump installations for extraction of water. We have motorized systems for boreholes, some of which are solar powered and others hybrid systems, maybe a mix of solar and generator grid. So all of these are the different ranges of water supply we talk about. So this is to deliver water, clean and safe water, to the beneficiary, the target group, delivering water supply to these people and ensuring that they have quality water. So it's not just water in quantity, but also the quality of it. So we do have considerations for treatment of water. If the source is not safe enough, we will engage in treatment, either bulk treatment, centralized bulk treatment, and then distribution, or where the option for centralized bulk treatment is not available, then we have household level treatment options. That is all still within the docket of water supply. And then when you look on the sanitation side, we look at provision of solutions at household level in the community, but also at institutional level. In Uganda, commonly in the southwestern, in fact, the whole country refugee operation, our most common household sanitation option are traditional peat latrines. This is what we provide. And what UNHCR's program is right at the moment, as far as sanitation is concerned, is to provide the refugee families with the materials. And with these materials, the refugee brings a contribution of labor to be able to construct their latrines on their own. So we, as much as possible, with the support of development partners, of course, we have lots of partners, over 20 partners that we're working with in the Uganda operation. So we provide the materials that the refugee households need, and then they're able to use this to construct their own traditional family latrines. And then at the institutional level, we also do have, again, sanitation options, which are mostly reusable lined pit latrines. VIP latrines. These are options which encourage longevity so that you're able to reuse these latrines. And so you have those options as well. And so there is a program of dislodging within this. And now these are mostly the hardware aspects. And then now hygiene promotion is overwhelmingly the software aspects, but it does cover a range of provision of like the supplies that the family would need or the institution would need, say like the cleaning materials, the gadgets that they need, the jerry cans, there is also the aspect of the menstrual hygiene management for the females in the reproductive age group. And then there would be the waste management, solid waste management, and it covers it to a smaller extent. We don't have very serious issues on drainage, but to a smaller extent, we do also talk about drainage control, but this is minimal, maybe tap stand drainage and things like that for keeping the environments clean. But overall, it is messaging, and there is lots of, we have to put out lots of communication on sensitization to educate the refugees for them to be able to understand the different risks out there that are related to poor wash practices, but also just to manage the environment, and then be able to also be able to communicate. Oh yes, a screen just came up just to show how many refugees we do have in the country. So 1.4 million, yeah, that's the total as at end of July across Uganda. The northern part, for someone who may be looking at the screen right now, the northern part of Uganda, Bidi, Palorinya, Adjumani, those are mostly South Sudan refugee response areas. And then as you come down towards the south, you come to the Congolese, DR Congo refugee caseloads, and then Rwanda and Burundi as you go further down. And where I am best right now is extreme southwest in the location called Mara. So I oversee that southwest region. Mm. So yes, as an overview, that is what WASH is about. So you cannot talk about the hardware aspects in WASH without talking about the software aspects. So it is a complete package of provision of the infrastructure as well as teaching people how to use the infrastructure effectively and sustainably to ensure that the operations and maintenance will cause the infrastructure to last longer and be able to support. Our overall goal when we do WASH is actually to reduce WASH-related morbidity to a minimum. I cannot say stop because it's probably not possible to stop, but we want to reduce as much as possible WASH-related morbidity in every WASH program that we do. So all the diseases related to WASH, to lack of or inadequacy, we aim to reduce this in every intervention we do, whether hardware or software, as far as the WASH programming goes.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Juliet. That was fantastic detail. And I certainly encourage everyone to use the chat function if you have any technical questions or otherwise. I guess one question that comes to mind for me, you mentioned kind of both the use and the water use and quality side, as well as the work at the household and community level. And I'd be curious to kind of hear a bit about some of the unique challenges. Obviously, that's a lot of ground to cover within those kind of two buckets.
Yeah, quality and household use. Huh? Well, if I would speak about quality, we do have variable quality consideration across the country, but I'll speak more authoritatively about the Southwest region because that is where I'm best. I am more familiar with the context on this side. So we do, as I mentioned, we do have point sources, which are like hand pumps. Some of these boreholes are shallow wells, while others are deep wells. So as you would expect, particularly the ones with the shallow aquifers, we are grappling with bacteriological contamination issues because of the surrounding activities. So oftentimes you will, and we do have protocols where we do monitor our water quality on a monthly basis using our test kits in the field, but also occasionally taking samples to a laboratory the national laboratory, so we're able to test more parameters. So this is like a routine activity that we do with the support of the partners, the NGO partners who implement WASH on behalf of UNHCR. So in the findings of these regular water quality analysis, we have found that there are some hand pumps, particularly the ones from shallow aquifers, that do have bacteriological contamination. And for these, the support that has been provided at the household level thus far has been provision of tablets, water treatment tablets. But as you would understand, this is not a sustainable intervention. So we do it ad hoc, and most especially where we have a risk, or we're always in collaboration with the health colleagues to show us indicators of the disease burden. And that, it will show us indicators of the disease burden. And so with this, we're able to establish where there are risk areas where we see increases in the morbidity related to WASH. And so we're able to target those locations, because to be honest, we cannot afford to distribute the tablets consistently. And this is where the Solvatten option comes in strongly. So far we have not had like extensively solar disinfection before Solvatten came in. We didn't have, we know that it is the most, like sustainable because of the less cost requirement, continuity, recurrent cost, but we haven't had that so much. So otherwise, for the lake water treatment systems, we do have an extensive lake water distribution source. For the lake water distribution sources, we are able to do a bulk treatment, and we're able to control that centrally and distribute. But the problem comes for locations which are not close enough to the piped water distribution systems. And these are the ones which will end up consuming water from the unsafe sources. And then we have the coliform issues. Other than the bacteriological contamination, we do also have challenges with chemical contamination. We do have occurrences of iron and manganese and even fluoride in some of our groundwater sources. Some of these, there's been attempts, for instance, for iron and manganese to put in place aeration, small time aeration filters, aeration and then filters, so that we're able to take out some of this oxidized iron and manganese. And that is working at that level, but we do not have a large scale iron and manganese purification, or could I say chemical treatment system at the moment. And on the side of institutional, we have had a few interventions in the past for what was this? I forget what it is called. It's a household level treatment at consumption level for ceramic filters. There are ceramic filters, which was one of the interventions that we had, but could not be sustained for a couple of reasons. So there has been attempts for household level water treatment options to be able to solve this problem at the household level, given the diversity and span of the settlement. It's extremely wide. And so it becomes really difficult to get all this treatment right to the households and the beneficiaries. So yeah, what we're looking for is options that are cost effective, affordable and sustainable and durable, and affordable. Yes. So we're excited about the latest collaboration we're having with Solvatten as of now, where we are scaling up. It's not the first intervention of Solvatten in Uganda, but we're scaling up support to households, whereby we're able to provide a solution that will not have recurrent cost requirement. For me, that is the biggest catch as far as the Solvatten kit is concerned. So for such options, first of all, you do know that most of our refugee families are vulnerable. And so by that, they're not able to afford a lot of inputs into something that has recurrent cost. So the idea of having something that does not require inputs and can be done easily at household level for taking water from wherever without necessarily going far off, because the water sources that we have in certain instances are far from them, the safe water sources. So it's kind of fills a gap that has not been filled by the scaling up of the water infrastructure, which costs money. We have done lots of resource mobilization, and development partners have come right through, but there is still gaps in regards to the infrastructure expansion. So for those locations where the infrastructure has not reached and we do not quite know when it will reach, we do want to proceed with scaling up household level treatment options to sort out the bacteriological quality problems that we have in those locations.
Great. Thank you, Juliet. I have so many other questions to ask, and I'm particularly excited kind of to hear more about your collaborations. You mentioned your work with other folks on the ground, other NGOs perhaps plugging in, as well as kind of how the current context with COVID has changed some of your work. But I'm just mindful of the time, so maybe we can circle back for some closing remarks to that end. And we can shift over to Numi for the time being, and how Darian and his team work to advance some of these issues. And I think maybe just to begin, Darian, if you wouldn't mind sharing a bit more detail about Numi and your mission and role.
Yeah, sure. Hopefully some of you guys are familiar with Numi Organic Tea. We're one of the largest organic and fair trade tea companies in North America and throughout the world. For me, I mean, I've been dear friends with the CEO and founder for some time. The company itself is very much a social enterprise. They were one of the first 10 B Corps, constantly pushing the envelope in terms of environmental sustainability, sort of empowering their farming communities. And Ahmed, the CEO, has also been a leader in the corporate community and created something called OSC Squared, One Step Closer for an Inorganic Sustainable Community, where he mobilized dozens of CEOs of sustainable food and beverage companies to aggregate their purchasing power and demand sustainable alternatives for packaging and promote climate change issues, et cetera. So there's a lot of sort of fertile ground that I inherited as the director of the foundation. I was actually initially the board chair when they started the foundation. And when I went to Madagascar to implement our first clean water project, it kind of changed my life. Typically, my work in the world is helping people help. I work with social entrepreneurs, nonprofit leaders, impact investors, CEOs of mission-led businesses, folks who want to change the world and help connect them to the best practices, helpful resources, and the contacts that they need to maximize impact. And so, usually I'm helping other people change the world, and this was some of my first field work. Kind of changed my life, and within 6 months of putting into practice all the things that I helped teach other people how to do, these 4,000 people had clean and safe drinking water for the first time in their lives. And for me, it was a very personal experience. I mean, Juliet just got done talking about WASH-related mobility, which sounds like a technical term, but just to, make that a little bit more concrete for folks, imagine having to walk 2 miles every day, multiple times a day, to go to the nearest clean water source, fetch that water, and then carry it back on your head for 2 miles, and do that 2 or 3 times a day. Never mind how difficult that is. Imagine the impact it would have on your ability to get an education, to generate economic resources for your family, right? So this is a huge issue, and we're talking about the very bottom of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So it's something you literally cannot do without. And this is something that about 800 million people across the world are facing. And for us at Numi, we realized pretty early on that you can't make tea without clean water. And even though we were empowering these farming communities and paying higher wages, et cetera, some of them still wrestled with clean and safe drinking water access. And the thing that was really unique for me as the head of their foundation is that the company knows the actual individual farm that 89% of its ingredients come from across 35 countries and counting. And so that enabled me to go in and meet with the exact farmers who were providing our turmeric in Madagascar, or our black tea in India, or our rooibos in South Africa, and work with them to kind of take things to another level on top of what the fair trade premiums had made possible. Just a couple other really quick observations for me as someone who had a background in social impact, but not necessarily water and WASH, that I didn't necessarily know getting into this work. Number one is you can't talk about water without talking about women. On average, globally, 80% of the work born around fetching, preparing, et cetera, everything having to do with that water is borne by women and girls. So when you fix the water issues, you enable women and girls to have better access to education, contribute economically, and all those other things I mentioned. Number two is, probably the 2 biggest pitfalls that I've seen face other water-focused projects, because I did a lot of deep listening before I dove in. Number one is what is oftentimes called the white savior complex, from what I've seen, which is these well-intended Western organizations, with this sort of will save you attitude, who basically view the people they're serving as victims. And what I've learned in my 20 years experience is almost nobody sees themselves as a victim. Right. And so if you approach it from a standpoint of you're a poor victim, I know what you need and I'm going to save you here, it's very rarely going to be successful, as opposed to leading with listening and saying, tell me about the kind of community, the kind of, household that you envision for yourself, and let me help you create that. That's why every single one of our water projects, the first money in was the actual farmers themselves contributing funds, and we're only showing up when invited. Right. And even then, there's a lot of deep listening, a lot of asking questions before we, intervene in any way. And the other thing that most people don't know is that 50%, half of the wells in Africa today don't work. They're not functional. Once again, these well-intended Western organizations swoop in, they build a well or do whatever other intervention, and then they leave, and there's no sense of local ownership. There's no sense of long-term sustainability, and you could have a 30-cent part break, but because there's not an eye toward how do we maintain this and how do we fix this, that becomes an issue. So you got to think in terms of generations, not just years. And I think those are some of the biggest observations for us. But in general, when we get invited, we come in, we ask a lot of questions, we figure out what the solution looks like, because typically there's not a one size fits all. It's a little different in every case, to Juliet's point about how deep we drill, or if, wells in general, or even the solution. And then, and only then, we work with the farmers, get some of their support, we put in some money and raise additional resources, and work with local on-the-ground partners. And even those partners are fundamentally not swooping in to save the day. They're helping the farmers, create their own sort of community 2.0, and perhaps providing some technical and scientific resources and expertise. But in my experience, that's really the way to do it. There's a great TED Talk by a friend of mine named Ernesto Ciroli called "If You Really Want to Change the World, Shut Up and Listen." It is totally brilliant and very much encapsulates my way of thinking and a lot of the philosophical challenges that face a lot of Western organizations that want to do some good work in the world.
Great. Thank you, Darian, for that wisdom and grounding. That was really incredible. I want to quickly just touch on it because I think you're coming from a really interesting perspective with both the foundation, kind of the CSR space. And I guess this is a personal kind of passion of mine and professional passion of mine, is how to connect the dots between corporate strategies and corporate goals all the way down to kind of the farm and field level, and how to create strategies that will work both kind of in terms of social and environmental sustainability. So any kind of insights or wisdom you have to that end in terms of your experience with Numi, working with that team, or kind of seeing peers in the space?
Yeah, thanks, Emma. Great question. I would say, in short, tear down the walls. That's what net impact is all about, right? That's what the field of social entrepreneurship is all about. Is in the old days, there was, business and there was impact, and they were very separate. Just like you had philanthropy, where you were giving money away to generate social impact, and then you have your financial investments, where all you care about is maximizing returns financially. And there's a new way of thinking. Net impact is based on it, which is this premise of looking at the Venn diagram of where does impact overlap with, with corporate strategy. That's the foundation of the B Corp movement. And in Numi's, example, what I saw was, we were doing a few things in the social impact arena, but it wasn't until this Together for Hope campaign that things really took off in a big way. And that is because it was so fundamentally focused on what we as a company were in a unique position to do. We were able to leverage that unique fact that we knew the exact farm where the ingredients come from. We were able to leverage this fundamental premise that you can't make tea without clean water. And so it was very on brand. And when we did that, it really led to unlocking a tremendous amount of resources. Even though we sound like a corporate foundation based on the name Numi Foundation, 2/3 of our funding is coming in from external sources. It was the same thing when I ran Craigslist Foundation. Most of the money came in from the outside. And yes, we're able to leverage our name and our goodwill and our network, suppliers, vendors, et cetera, as an asset from which to raise money, from which to partner and advance our initiatives. But it's only once the story really lines up in everybody's mind that the road rises up to meet you and tremendous resources get unlocked, in my experience.
Great. Thank you for that.
Sure.
And one final question, and then I think we'll move to Petra for the time being. What kind of exciting projects looking ahead to the next couple of years do you see for the foundation?
Well, we're in the middle of a huge pivot right now. So it is hard for me to answer the question about like years down the road because the world is changing so quickly at the moment. I will say that at the risk of, kind of having a repeat of W on that big aircraft carrier with mission accomplished, we've been continuously asking our farming communities who else wants access to clean and safe drinking water and needs help. And everyone who's asked for our help has gotten it. So we're sort of looking at, okay, where do we go from here? Water was on brand, it was perfect, and everybody's gotten our help that needs it. So maybe we go into education or healthcare or, other ways to empower those farming communities, again, leading with listening and asking them what would be most helpful. Where we've really been focused our efforts, because there's not as much demand internationally right now and everyone's in kind of just trying to weather the storm, is on the domestic side. Our main domestic program is an organic gardening curriculum. This coming school year will reach over 20,000 low-income elementary school students here in the San Francisco Bay Area. But when school closed because of COVID, those school gardens weren't really a useful educational forum anymore. And so we launched essentially an emergency food relief program. This is a separate webinar and discussion, but global hunger has doubled directly as a result of COVID. And in the US alone, you've got 70% increase in food insecurity, and 40% of the families going to the food banks have never used them before. So you've got a huge issue there. And the low-income families we were serving through our gardening program rely on those school meals. And so we saw that as a big issue, did a deep dive into that field, and realized that there was a major issue there. And within 2 weeks of the schools closing, we were delivering our first food to low-income families. We basically started a free CSA program, a home delivery program for low-income families, sourcing food from struggling family farms owned by women and people of color. And after receiving a bunch of funding and partnering with some groups like Salesforce and Steph Curry, ultimately we served up about 300,000 pounds of food to over 3,200 families in the last couple months. And now we're looking to launch an ongoing social enterprise, basically a sliding scale CSA program where low-income folks can pay $10 a week and get fresh bag of produce delivered to their door. And then some higher income families can pay $35 a week. Still save some money, but for every one of those, we're able to do one subsidized one. So sort of like buy one, give one, but more like buy one, help one, since it won't be completely free. But that'll be a self-sustained model that we'll be able to operate in perpetuity, because a lot of these families live in food deserts, and even before COVID had very low quality, very poor access to food at any kind of reasonable price or quality.
Great. Wonderful. Yeah, and we'll jump back to this idea of collaboration, especially with the current COVID-19 context towards the end of our panel. I want to turn to Petra from Solvatten, and just to begin, Petra, can you describe yourself, your role, and the Solvatten technology briefly?
In Stockholm now, and I was thinking Stockholm was famous for 130 years ago to be the most stinking capital in Europe, and people were living without access to good sanitation or hygiene. We had no showers, no running water, and no safe water, and that of course you could see in the lifetime of people living in the unhealthy situation and poverty. So I'm a little bit thinking about what we have discussed today, and it's also the role of new innovations and to see from the angle of the problem owner, the people who are living in the situation of having no access to safe water, nor having access to running water from the tap. That would be wonderful if everyone in the world, we are 7.8 billion people, if we all of us could have access to safe quality water, running both hot and cold from the tap. You could imagine the difference And I think what we are working now with, it's a gap in between, and Solvatten is filling a little bit, but it has anyway done something from the idea. Now we have about 400,000 people using the technology from just an idea. And I think that, yeah, we have learned a lot, and to be humble to the situations and how difficult it is. And as you talked about earlier, it's about time for women, and it's about energy. We should not forget the combination water, energy, and poverty. But then there is a sun, and the sunshine, that was what really took me. I thought perhaps I could do something, and that started a long time ago now. But we have had the company for 10 years, and we have seen the impact about the technology. But it's using the sun to treat and heat water. And I wanted to make a tool for women, especially, and it should be high quality and long-lasting product that would easy to use. And yeah, that's Solvatten. And I think to use something that it's easy, the uptake is high, and it makes access easier to improve hygiene, and especially in those days, everyone talking about hand wash and to improve hygiene. But if you don't have the tools, it's hard. So, and if they are available at home and easy access, I think that's what it's all about. And we see the other, if you want to treat water, normally people use fuel, firewood, charcoal in the countries we are working in, and that's also part of the environment. That if you can save the trees and use more power of the sun, not just the electricity from the sun, also the thermal energy, and that's Solvatten is using. And it was also for me a big aha when I made the first test with Solvatten, that we also could treat viruses and parasites. So it's not just bacteria. And I think that's, yeah, I'm so impressed what the sun can do with a good UV radiation and the combination to use heat and UV. We have seen so good results.
Wonderful, thank you for that. And you alluded to this a little bit, but could you speak maybe specifically about how Solvatten is working with WASH?
Yeah, and WASH, I would like to highlight both the big W, but also the big H, because hygiene is so important, and to look at the refugee settings and where people live in poverty, it's time consuming, not just to fetch water, it's also to treat the water, to heat the water. You have to have hot water for boiling or for bathing your baby, or hygiene, and I mean there are so many parts that you need hot water for, and also quality water. So WASH is for us very, very important to kind of talk out loud about, to make it more simple and more easy for people, and especially the women and the children to naturally, the history tells that if we have access and to have it easy, we're going to take big steps for especially for the reducing poverty.
Wonderful, thank you. And I guess I'd be curious to hear a little bit about kind of the business model or commercial viability of the innovation, and kind of as a tag along, how you ensure people can actually use the technology.
Sorry, I missed a little bit of your question. Sorry for that.
If you could speak a bit to kind of the business model and commercial viability of the technology.
Yeah, for us, we have always been focusing on to reach the most vulnerable people. And how do you do that if people cannot afford to invest, if you have some product as Solvatten, long-lasting? So we work with the NGOs, we work with companies, with corporate partners who are looking at their climate footprint, and then they calculate how many tons of carbon emission reduction they want to find a solution for. And Solvatten is one solution for that. So with that, we can also calculate how many tons you save. When you save trees every year, you can also save tons of carbon. And with that, you can finance Solvatten to reach the NGOs we are partnering with, and to reach, they know who's the most vulnerable people and the situations they can select. So it's a very important part, but it's also to really measure the impact and to give back to our partners here. So it's about sunshine stories, but real stories, and it's measurable to see less time is spent, and you have less sick days, and you save a lot of money instead of buying fuel wood and medical costs. So that's a model we use today, but there are other ways to really to engage and that enables Solvatten to reach where we want them to reach. So cooperation with different, both private and organizations and corporate partners is so important, and especially today when we see if we can reduce the threat of spread of COVID-19.
Wonderful, thank you. And I think that's a great segue to just kind of hear the very brief closing remarks from Juliet and Darian as well, in terms of their thinking on how COVID-19 has presented challenges and opportunities for increased collaboration. And I'll just flag, we're going to be moving to the audience Q&A in just a few moments. So if folks would like to ask any questions, please add them to the chat, and we'll have our speakers answer them at the end. But quickly, over to you, Juliet, for a closing remark to that end.
Thank you once again, Emma. Yes, COVID. COVID has made us rethink. Well, we've seen from over the last couple of months that it's not enough to just produce the water, but we're seeing the importance of ensuring continued access to this water that we are producing amidst all the COVID-related restrictions. You know, like the safety guidelines we have been given, and Uganda has put in place really some stringent guidelines. In the beginning, we just had to stay home and no one could go anywhere. And then we had challenges as regards the institutional setup of the water production units in the settlements. Of course, as humanitarian workers, we had to continue working, but again, observing the health limitation, the health safety guidelines. So at the end of the day, how has it was a challenge, but also presented an opportunity in the sense of rethinking the way we could continue to provide our service amidst this kind of crisis, but also other related crises that would apparently restrict access to the resource. So for one, we have had to go into, if you talk about the hygiene side, I mean, you can't talk of COVID response without talking of increasing hand washing, because this was identified as one of the most impactful activities as far as reducing the spread of COVID is concerned. So we've had to scale up as UNHCR and partners, the hand washing campaigns in the different locations. Of course, when you talk hand washing, that means increase water supply, or at least ensure its reliability. in the different locations. So there's been a lot of efforts with the support of our development partners in extending water systems. But even with all of that, I can tell you that even as I speak for the southwestern region, which covers 4 settlements, mostly Congolese settlements, our average water supply right now is still at 10.6 liters per person per day. 10.6 liters per person per day. This is compared to the sphere emergency minimum of 15 liters per person per day. So this means that about half of the population in the southwest, let's say 150,000 refugees, still do not have access to water, because 10.6 is just half of our target, UNHCR target of 20, and falls short of even the minimum target of 15 of the sphere. So there's been lots of effort amid these COVID realities and the need to increase water supply. There's been lots of effort to scale up production, to scale up infrastructure, extend pipelines, but we're still not there. Mm-hmm. There is still a lot to do. There's still a lot of people out there, refugees and even host community, who do not have access to water. I had Darian talking about the walking distance issue. It's too embarrassing to say. It goes even beyond 2 kilometers in certain instances where someone has to walk to a water point. And if they do not walk to that safe water point, then they're having to go to an unsafe water point, which is closer in the neighborhood. That's the talk about household water treatment options. Anyhow, so amidst all of this, some of the things we've also tried to do is increase like soap supply, because initially we were only giving like 1 piece of soap per family, per household, per individual, per month. But now we had to double that because of the emphasis on the whole wash hands with soap, you know, the adequate washing of hands, the proper washing of hands. So there has been lots of resource requirement in this COVID response, a lot of resource requirement. And unfortunately, you may have heard already in the press, our ports are running dry in UNHCR. And as such, we are appealing continually, and we've had lots of support coming in from partners. We have had attention coming in from different angles and partners coming in, and COVID-related task forces. It has brought us together in trying to fight this amidst the limitations of resources. So we have had one great opportunity that came up during this time, was the introduction of the automated water dispensers in one of the settlements that I cover in the southwest. Because previously we have had the ordinary taps where you open and water comes out. And then with the minimization of touching and contact, we have had to introduce a pilot for automated smart taps, automated water dispensers, which is a great innovation. This is just to minimize the infection control so that we have less. And then we've had to think about how to continue collaborating, how to continue coordinating with our partners and even the beneficiaries, the persons of concern. UNHCR calls them persons of concern. How do we continue collaborating with them in a way that ensures continuity of the service, that they're still able to access this service, even if we are limited in our movement, so that we're not able to be there, we're not able to engage with them in the focus group discussions that we used to, we're not able to dialogue with them the way we used to, because they're not able to do such streaming of internet. But at least we still, what we have done in that regard to handle that gap is to empower the community-based structures. We do have community-based structures who are now our foot soldiers on the ground. We call them village health teams. In another way, we also call them hygiene promoters. Then we also have sanitation teams and public health teams. These are all refugee groups of people, community groups. And so we're having lots of community-led efforts because of the limitation of the staff in getting down there and moving as freely as they used to and interacting with the community as freely as they used to. And of course, we try to equip these community based structures with some protective gear. We're supporting them with distribution of masks and all of those things. So we're kind of taking the bull by the horns, knowing that we still have the obligation to provide the service and we cannot dare back out. So we go ahead to look at how can we continue. Of course, on the health side, it's even more challenging because they have to continue seeing the clients who come to the health facilities. The biggest challenge has been how to control the whole social distancing thing at water points, because knowing that the resource is limited at the moment, we do have crowdings at the water points, and yet people still have, we don't yet have enough resource to provide water 24/7. So we do have scheduling of water supply, where water is supplied, say, for 2 hours at each water point. And so in those 2 hours, the whole crowd comes. Everyone is scrambling to get water. And so the challenge we're still grappling with right now, and have not found a solution, is how do we manage the social distancing at water collection points, in view of the fact that we can only provide the water supply for a couple of hours at each water point while we switch to the next water point and the next, because we're talking about so many water points and so many people in a given settlement. So we have put in place things like hand washing at water points so that we may control the infection as much as possible. But all of this we know is not yet adequate, and we're just looking for how do we manage the crowds that come at water points. Everyone wants to get a jerrycan of water, and they must get it within those 2 hours. We try to increase hours of pumping and production, but it is still not adequate to maintain the required social distancing required at the water points, that is recommended at the water points. So yes, I guess that is what I could say for now.
Thank you so much for that. Yeah, and that's certainly just that image you painted really puts things in perspective for me, at least. So I think we are getting kind of close to the end. So I think we can move to the Q&A, but maybe just Darian, if you can share a 20-second kind of spiel. Sorry to cut your time short. I think we can do that and then move to a Q&A at the end.
Yeah, I mean, I think what COVID has done is it's laid bare some of the inequalities and inequities in our world. And the issue we're talking about here, which is water access, I mean, literally no human can live without it. It is at the very bottom of the hierarchy of needs. And, to Juliet's point, hand washing is sort of, along with masks, one of the first things they're recommending. And if that's not possible, that could create huge issues. And so it's been a horrible setback for this country to be able to shut down our economy for all this time, along with many other countries. What about the developing countries that don't have that luxury? And, compounding that with things like access to water and the lack of social distancing. I mean, I really hope we get a vaccine and all this stuff just kind of goes away momentarily. But if it gets worse, this is going to be one of the bottlenecks where we need to look at the overlap between water access and public health, because it is fundamental. And from a collaboration standpoint, I'll just say I have a fundamental belief that the rope is stronger than the thread, and that the challenges facing this world in general, whether it's water access, food access, or climate change, you name it, none of them can be solved by one single person or organization. So it is absolutely critical to social impact that we find ways to work with other groups, support their work, and collaborate in a way that makes things possible.
Thank you, Darian. That's wonderful closing remarks. And thank you all three for kind of the wisdom and passion. I certainly learned a lot, and I'll just pass things over to the Net Impact team. I think my sense is many of the audience questions were addressed already in the chat function, but we'll turn things over to them for closing.
Yeah, as you all may have seen, there's been some really great discussion in the chat window. It does seem like most of the questions there were answered. So I want to just open it up for a few minutes to the floor, see if anybody here has any questions for the panelists. Otherwise, I'd be happy to kind of cover some of the questions that were asked here. So a really good question was, how many liters does a Solvatten container hold, and how much does it weigh, related to kind of transportation of the units?
In pound.
And I think we got an answer there in the chat that it's a 10-liter container and it's about 2.5 kilograms per unit. And there's some interesting information there on a 7 to 10 year lifespan per unit, which is excellent. And then how many liters of water does one jerrycan produce in its lifespan, and how does that vary related to the thermal light availability?
Yeah, it depends on where. I mean, in Mali, for example, if you use it a couple of times a day, We have seen, I mean, people are using it for now 7, 8, 9 years, and the same units. So to produce 50,000 liters, I don't know in gallons, but yeah, it's that's what we have seen and heard. So it's quite a lot of treated water. And it can be up to 75 degrees hot, 75 degrees in Celsius, I don't know in Fahrenheit. But it's also good to have it preheated for cooking and so you can really reduce time and energy consumption.
Excellent. Well, if there aren't any more questions, I know we're almost at time, so we can kind of start wrapping up. Please let me know if there are any more questions.
167 degrees.
167 Fahrenheit, yeah, okay.
Excellent. So thank you so much for joining. Thanks to all the panelists. Thank you, Emma, for moderating. We wanted to let you know about the next Net Impact event. It's on September 22nd, and the focus is how to market yourself in a time of crisis. And so it's really for job seekers or people looking to sharpen their LinkedIn profiles. And we're going to have an insider, a former LinkedIn recruiter and social impact coach to really kind of work on that, especially given the recent changes in our society and focus on work. So we really hope you had a good time today. Thank you for joining. A bit of a different time than our usual afternoon events, but thank you so much for joining and staying a little bit late. We hope that you are able to sign up for our newsletter if you aren't already on there, and follow us on social media. Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook links are right there.
Thank you very much. We're happy to have you all on board, and it's so important to find solutions. We need it.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great day. Appreciate your time, and thank you to all our panelists. Thank you.
Bye-bye.